And I am going to give us just a couple minutes because I'm sure that there are people who are still filtering out of other sessions. Or their breaks, hopefully. Lovely to see even more IU people. Hi, everyone. I'm just giving us a couple minutes to let everybody filter in. Figure I'll probably get started in a minute or two if you want to run and grab a cup of coffee or something like I did. Okay, I think our numbers are pretty stable here, so I will go ahead and get started. Before I really jump into the meat of it, I wanted to ask for a little bit of grace from you all today. I'm sure some of you noticed I was out sick yesterday. I apologize if you plan to attend any of my other presentations. I'm still recovering today, so my energy level isn't quite where it usually would be on this topic. Hopefully that means that I'll talk slow enough that you can pick up what I want to share with you today. It might end up being a good thing, but regardless, I just wanted to let you know that if I'm a little muted today, it's definitely just recovery. It is not this topic. This is something that I am very, very passionate about. So, hi, I am Emily Oakes. My role at IU at Indiana University right now is Principal Unizin IT Consultant. So I am really lucky. I'm one of the few university side people whose entire job is Unizin. When Michelle Kelmer held this role before me, I asked her twice, what is a day in your job like? And both times she gave me different answers. And that is kind of the joy of having a role that is Unizin. There are so many exciting things that are happening in a consortium that you can do some new, different, fun thing every day, which is awesome. But before that, I spent most of my IUIT career in technical support for e-learning tools, either directly supporting or leading teams responsible for supporting students, faculty, and staff, especially staff in our teaching and learning centers in IU's online learning environment. So I used data as part of my job to help identify what the human behind the keyboard might have been doing. If a faculty member called for help saying a really common one was that their course materials disappeared from their Canvas site, I'd asked when they noticed their materials disappeared, and then I'd use that information to find in their Canvas page views, so Canvas data, what they were looking at the time, what page they were on. The data were often the piece of the puzzle that I needed to help, in addition to that faculty member's recollection of whatever they were doing at the time. So I've used the data, and these days I spend a lot of my time working in this area at a higher level. I use data steward for learning management and learning analytics data, meaning that I'm responsible for ensuring that we have proper policy and protocols for learning analytics use at IU. No pressure, right? But in many ways, I think I'm one of the right people for this role. Without a really strong understanding of how your constituents use your technologies, generally you're going to have a harder time understanding how to encourage them to adopt something new, especially something as abstract as learning analytics. The data steward role is independent from my Unizin IT consultant role. So fortunately, I still get to do both. I do learning analytics outreach as part of my Unizin role, and I use what I learned there in my data steward role. All right. I'm really excited to see how this goes with you all, and I hope you'll bear with me and work through this activity with me. Before I continue, on the next slide, I'm going to show you 2 surveys. If your first name starts with the letters A through M, I would like you to open the first survey. It's going to be the one on the left. If your first name starts with the letter N through Z, I want N as in Nancy, sorry. Open the second survey, that'll be the one on the right. And I am going to put all this in the chat for you as well. The responses to those surveys are going to be shared publicly, so keep that in mind. I'm going to be showing some of the responses that you give us on the following slides. Please, 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 please open one survey and one survey only. I know that some of you are going to go and peek anyway, but at least if you really have to look, please only look at the second survey after filling out the first one. Ideally, you'll fill out the first one a couple of times, so you won't have the other one to bias you, but honor system, please stick with one survey, even if you open the wrong one. And for both of those surveys, just so you know, I'm not like trying to trick you. I am just giving you a scenario and I'm asking you to brainstorm what may be happening. So this isn't like a gotcha question. I'm generally just asking, what do you think? What do you imagine? What could have happened here? All right. So here are the surveys, and I'm going to put those links and what I just shared with you in the chat. I'm going to give you 8 minutes, and I'm going to time that. You don't need to use the full 8 minutes. If you would like to use that time to go and grab a coffee, take whatever break you need, that's just fine. I will let you know verbally and in the chat when we are at the 4 minutes and then maybe the 1 minute mark. So timer is starting now. And I'm not going anywhere, so if any of you are having issues with the links, let me know in the chat and I'll help you out. About 3 minutes and 30 seconds remaining. Well, I didn't hit a minute, but about 30 seconds remaining. All right, time is up. So I'm going to take my screen back for a second here. While I'm refreshing this with your responses, I'm curious if you all had any responses to those surveys. Was there anything you were thinking as you were trying to come up with your responses? I'll take that to mean so many things.
I just had to get back from my cookie run to turn on my mic for you. I think there's a lot of possibilities as to why. One of mine, I ended with, or life, like it feels like pandemic life. Anything could have happened.
Wanting to know what's on the other side of the survey. Yep. All right. So here are some of the responses that we got. The responses over on the left are to that first survey, and yes, I will show you what both of them are in just a second. The second one is to the second survey. So in the first set of responses, you know, we've got stress around midterms, family stress. There are some family themes in here, right? Life may have kept Jules from doing the homework that they needed to do. Something came up with their siblings. Changes in Jules's schedule might afford less time for studying for quizzes. And then on the flip side of this, we've got maybe there was an issue with quiz configuration. Maybe that's why the quiz scores dropped so dramatically. Maybe there are other classes that folks are focused on right now. Maybe we're near spring break and people are just checked out, or you know, something else is due that day. So there's a lot of different things going on here. And I was really interested to see how this group in particular had responded to these two surveys, because I think more than some others, there are folks in here who would pick up on what I'm trying to get at here. So here is what we were looking at. I gave you one survey that was essentially written from the perspective of a student, Jules, who is a 20-year-old undergrad studying early childhood education. She doesn't really, you know, she likes math, she likes getting done what she needs to get done, but she doesn't love tinkering with technology. So she's maybe not as fluent in especially e-learning systems as some other folks might be. She would be tripped up by some more challenges. Then on the flip side, the other survey, I gave you a little bit more of the class context and especially the instructor context, so their state of mind as opposed to the student state of mind. And I was curious to see what that would do to your responses. So rolling back to what you submitted here, over on the left, these, you know, stress around midterms, family stress, something came up with their siblings. Those are all responses that you were able to give me because I gave you a little bit of that context, right? I told you that Jules has siblings that they take care of. Our imaginary student, Jules, takes care of their siblings. Their mother works during the day, that kind of thing. So I provided that kind of context to sort of bias your answers in that they've got other things going on direction. Meanwhile, you know, so does the instructor, right? Everybody's in the middle of a pandemic, and I wanted to provide a little bit of that more coursey instructory context to see how that might bias your answers in a different way there. I'm happy to share the full spreadsheets of those responses too, if you're curious to see the real spectrum of answers. That was only a selection of a few of them. And I really, so what, right? I wanted to start off with that activity just to really try and illustrate that we're all only human, right? We've all got stuff going on. That was true before we fell into a pandemic, and it's really, really true now. If I was able to bias your responses to some objective data in certain directions, just using some Google Forms, I find it hard to imagine that everything else going on in our world right now couldn't bias our responses to data in certain directions too. Misreading the data can lead to misapplying interventions, which is both a real loss of time on the part of the instructor, the faculty member, but it's also obviously potentially unhelpful or even harmful for our students. This isn't just my concern, it's a concern that I hear consistently from faculty that I speak with on this topic. In fact, when I present on Review, Amend, Apply, I'll often have faculty sharing with me misuses of data that they've seen from their colleagues. There are really clearly concerns here, and folks are looking for a way forward. So how are we going to do that? What is the way forward? Well, the answer, as you can probably guess, is going to be Review, Amend, Apply, since that is the title of this presentation. But before I get into it, I'm going to show you this slide, which every time I'm presenting with faculty, I say, I am also, I use Data Steward for learning management and learning analytics data. And as far as I'm concerned, that obligates me to start with this. And I share that, in my opinion, it is critical that before we start using analytics in a classroom context, we explain to students that Canvas reports to the instructor which pages the student have clicked on, that the instructor may ask students questions based on their online behavior, that they respect students' privacy, that our institution respects student privacy. We have a privacy.iu website that goes into some detail on how we use student data, so I suggest pointing to that. I always strongly recommend that all faculty say to their students, if they're going to be using analytics, that they are using the information to help students succeed, not to penalize them. We're not trying to catch students not logging into Canvas one day to, unenroll them. This is a process that they are a participant in. This is information that we are sharing with them to help them achieve their goals as students. And as always, I do also recommend including a syllabus statement on this content. And those are out there, right? Like as a result of this slide, of this presentation, there are quite a few folks who have taken the content and moved it into their syllabus. It's something that, in my experience, resonates really well. We have a lot of people who are very concerned about that data misuse, misread thing. So step one, be transparent with students. That's not the end of the process, but it is absolutely step one in this context. Moving on to the meat of it, let's talk about review, amend, apply. So one of the first really big gaps that I noticed when I was talking to faculty about learning analytics use, we had a lot of people who had maybe opened a dashboard in Canvas once or twice. They looked at the data. There were probably a couple of things that made them go, oh yeah, no, okay, so yeah, that's sort of interesting. And then they never opened it again because they were having a really hard time getting from the data to action. And then when you pile on top of that, these, sort of ethical considerations of using data students don't know you have access to impact their learning, like there's a lot to address there. And review, amend, apply was really intended to work through all of those things. So the way that we do it, you start by reviewing information as a faculty member, right? You start by reviewing the information that's available to you about students' behavior. So this is the step where you're opening that dashboard or you're looking at that, what we were looking at the start of the surveys. Once you have looked at those data and you've kind of brainstormed what might have happened there. So again, that like, okay, we've seen a really big drop. What happened? What could have possibly happened? We don't know. There's a lot of variables to unpack there. We can look at the data, but we don't know what happened. So step two, we amend the information that we've gathered with student feedback to ensure that what we do next is accurate. That is, hey everybody, I saw that you really struggled on that last quiz, some maybe better phrasing than that, but it looked like this content was really challenging. Can you let me know what you found challenging? Was there, did we not cover it thoroughly enough previously? Was there just something else going on? Can you give me that information? So you take the feedback from students, and then based on what you learned from the data and what you learned from your students, you apply some kind of evidence-based intervention in the classroom. And this is the part that I think we're already familiar with, right? Like this is what the teaching and learning centers on all of our campuses do. They help people find those evidence-based practices to address teaching problems. So this part, the apply stuff, I tend not to focus on as much. I think we've got a lot of good background on how to answer those questions. It's the review, amend bit that is really critical to this. And there are a lot of details, right? So when I go and I talk to faculty who teach huge classes, and I say, all right, so all you're going to do is review a dashboard, and then you're going to reach out to your students and ask them for their feedback. And they're like, Emily, we've got 300 people. this class. How on earth are you expecting us to get back all that feedback? And there are mechanisms for that. So myself and some of my fantastic and thoroughly talented teaching and learning center colleagues from around the state of Indiana, we came together and we wrote this test book, Review, Amend, Apply, a framework for using analytics in the classroom, to sort of help get through those weeds. As an example, there is an amend chapter, and we lay out all the different tools that you can use to gather student feedback in a way that isn't going to be totally burdensome. For some folks, it's going to make a lot of sense to stand up at the front of the room and just ask, assuming we're in the in-person context, and ask, hey, everybody, can you give me your feedback here? For others, it might make more sense to do something like a top hat poll with some finite number of responses that students can send in. There are other ways to get feedback for larger and smaller audiences, and those are all detailed in this press book. Actually, that link I don't have. Michelle, if you wouldn't mind dropping that one into chat, I would appreciate it. Thank you. All right, let's move on to some other examples. So this is a dashboard, a screenshot of some data in Canvas Analytics. This is one of the built-in dashboards from Instructure, the vendor. There are a couple of things going on here. The top band here, these are the page views for a student. The page view might be a student clicked on the home tab in Canvas, and then they clicked on the modules tab, and then they clicked on a specific module, and then they clicked on a reading. Like, those are all registering as page views. The second band is participation. So a student submitted a quiz, a student submitted an assignment, etc. What we're seeing in this is one of my favorite examples to show. Our student is, their page views are fairly high. They're navigating through the course. They've got one or two participations, and then all of a sudden we start seeing it tail off at the end there. I will give you some more context on this one, but first I'm curious what you all think when you see this chart. Does anything jump out at you? And you can drop this into chat or unmute. Student drop the course. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
1,800 page views in a week? 2 weeks?
You can maybe ignore that one.
Yeah, how do you, that's just like mad clicking here, there, and yonder, as far as I can tell.
Student drop the course is a good guess, yeah. See, I think this one's really interesting because it gets at something that is really familiar to a lot of folks, but when we see it in data form, it's not always as obvious. Lack of participation, or instructor doesn't require submission through LMS. Yeah. Were there assignments due at all during the weeks of 9/22? And are they working on a large assignment that has yet to be turned in? Yep, that could be it. All right, so what I see, and I think we're starting to kind of get at that in the comments, what I see here is, wow, you were really active the weeks of 9/29 and 10/6 and 10/13 when there were no submissions in that class. That seems unusual. How many students do we know who are really active in a Canvas course when they have nothing driving their engagement? And so this one was me, the student was me, and I was building a Canvas course. And I used one of my own views of the data just for privacy reasons and all that, but this is something that we see in classes. We'll see the opportunities for participation, so those low stakes quizzes, et cetera, sort of drop off, and at the same time, the student participation, the page views, et cetera, are dropping off. This is a situation where maybe it makes sense to add some more low stakes quizzes. You want to encourage engagement, well, we know that that works. We have the research to indicate that that's the kind of way that you can get students engaging with the content a little bit more. So why don't we apply that kind of intervention? One of the things, and this has come up through a couple of sessions, it's a little bit of a theme that you'll hear here and there. Analytics driving course design, I think, is a really interesting and valuable discussion to be had, because this is exactly the sort of indicator that can help us build better courses. But overall, you know, in the context of review, amend, apply, right? We reviewed the data, we kind of brainstormed what might have been happening here. And interestingly, you know, we're all kind of generally coming to the same sort of ideas, like, okay, yeah, I get it. There's a lack of participation. And yes, I see there aren't any submissions down there. So what's going on? We kind of hone in on where the issue is. I think that learning analytics work really well as sort of an early warning system. We may not know exactly what's going on, but we know there's definitely something happening here. So once we see that, especially if this trend carried true across our entire class, that's the point where we say, all right, hold up, students aren't clicking through my materials. We got to figure out what's going on here. We go and ask, right? Hey, everybody, I noticed that overall class participation in the Canvas site has been especially low. What's up? Is there something going on? Is there, et cetera, especially if you start seeing that in addition to those page views dropping, grade suffering as well. Right? And we already talked about the kind of applications that we would consider here, something like adding in those low stakes quizzes to drive that engagement back up would be a way to apply here. Here's another one, and I always love using Engage Analytics as the example here. I'm not gonna belabor this one too much because I've used it so often that some of you may have seen it before. But the gist here is that the dark blue line over on the right side of the blue bar, so right under Chelsea Hunley here, the right side of the dark blue bar indicates that Chelsea had revisited pages at the end of the first chapter of this book, which for this particular book, the end of the chapter included the end of chapter summary and review questions. So it was a pretty standard textbook in an online format. There are a lot of things that could have been happening here. Again, I'm not gonna make you brainstorm all of the possible responses here. I'm gonna tell you, as you are sitting there trying to figure out what might have happened, Chelsea read the chapter summary before digging into the rest of the chapter to have a better idea what she would be learning. So she wanted to read the summary just to kind of like give her a little bit of high level context before going back and reading the rest. After reading the chapter all the way through, she landed back on the final page with the chapter summary, which counted as a reread. Alternately, Chelsea may have had friends taking the class with her, and they may have worked together to answer the chapter review questions. You know, the point here is that there are multiple reasons why these data might end up looking the way that they do, but there's still something going on there. And that's what we want to get at. That's where the value is. We just want to make sure that we're getting at it accurately. Excuse me. So like I said previously, this framework is first of all, intended to help address that gap that faculty communicate. I have no idea how to get to the data from action. It's also significantly lower risk than taking action based on incomplete data. So that tendency to look at a dashboard and say, I know what's going on here, and then take some kind of action. Frankly, it is high risk. That's only one piece of the puzzle. There are a lot of variables in this universe, especially when you're talking about human behavior. So making sure that you're injecting human judgment, making sure that the faculty member has an opportunity to say, tell me, students, tell me your perspective, tell me what's happening here, is critical to making sure that we're making good decisions that'll support student success. This also helps build confidence. You know, I have been very fortunate to be able to talk with faculty who don't feel super familiar with learning analytics. It's just by virtue of some of the events we have. I have a lot of people who stumble in and would not normally talk learning analytics, and they come and they listen to me talk about it. And there is research to support this, but anecdotally, yes, it is tough. People look at these data. They are not coming from fields where they handle data a lot. They don't know what to do. They're afraid of making mistakes, like anybody would be. It's a high stakes thing, you know. So having a built-in safety net, that amend piece, really helps build confidence. It gives faculty an opportunity to validate what they think they're seeing in the data, and that is absolutely important, because without having that confidence, they are not going to be using the tools and services that we're trying to bring in front of them. All of my student privacy and ethics people are going to be cheering at this one. This also involves students in their own learning. It just as critical with learning analytics like it is with any other aspect of learning. These are student data. These are expressions of student behaviors. It is absolutely critical to their learning to let them know that this is there and it can help them, and faculty can use these data with them to help them succeed. It is significantly more powerful than trying to use the data outside of context and without that perspective. This was actually one of the topics that I would have covered at my presentation yesterday that I was unfortunately sick through, but I did want to just pull the slide up for you so you could at minimum grab some of these materials. This one I do have to drop in the chat for you. We ran an activity using a lot of the materials that I just showed you with some of our teaching and learning center staff. We asked folks to review some learning analytics dashboards available to faculty to brainstorm what students might be doing. So again, pretty much exactly what we just did. We tried comparing the brainstorming with the actual behavior of the students, talked about methods for collecting student feedback, and describe some of those barriers for using learning analytics in the classroom. The reason I want to bring this up is because all of those materials are available on the web. That's the link that I just shared. Sorry about that. This was one piece of increasing Unizin awareness on campus. So if you did want to attend that session previously and you're still interested in that, definitely check out that link. It's going to get you to all of the information that I would have presented there, and a little more about how you can have these conversations on your campus, especially with your teaching and learning center staff who are probably trying to field these questions with faculty who are hearing that learning analytics is the thing to do. One thing about this presentation that I hadn't mentioned, we were initially planning to properly launch workshops around Review and Apply at both IU and University of Minnesota. This presentation would have covered our results, but COVID got in the way. I'm wondering how many times you all have heard that today. And in some ways, that may have been a blessing. It's really allowed me to float this framework to faculty who, like I said, wouldn't normally engage with learning analytics, but are feeling a new sense of urgency since they got pushed online. Having those conversations with faculty across our events and in one-on-one context has really validated for me, right, the strength of this framework. And I do plan to move forward from here by continuing to inject this framework into discussions and workshops that I have with faculty around appropriate data use. The responses I've received have been overwhelmingly positive, which is a really, really, really rare thing to say about a conversation with faculty about learning analytics. As many of you know, unless you're working with folks who have a really strong background in data science, it can be extremely difficult to overcome the unfamiliarity barrier. Review, amend, apply is built-in safety net. Again, that amend piece, it gives faculty the confidence that they need to start engaging with these data and potentially using them to identify problems in their classroom. So that is the bulk of what I wanted to share with you today. I really believe in the power of this framework and in the potential for data use more generally, assuming that we're, doing it responsibly. I like to make good decisions based on good data, right? I think we all do. And I hope that this gives you some ideas for how you can approach this conversation at your institutions too. I know that this is not an easy discussion to have. I have had it with many of you, and I've had it with many folks around our institutions. It's challenging, and this has been genuinely, truly a success. It blows my mind every time I do another speed dating event talking about the review, amend, apply framework, and faculty leave saying, "Oh, this was the best session of the day. Learning analytics." Very rare. If you would like to know more, of course, the press book that I mentioned is available online. That's at iu.pressbooks.pub/review, amend, apply, also in the chat. You can get a hold of me at emihunt, EMIHUNT, at iu.edu. I am definitely happy to talk with anybody who's trying to figure out how to navigate the space at their institution, especially once we're on the other side of the summit. Thank you, Michelle. And with that, I'm definitely happy to answer any questions, clarify anything that you all would like. I'm gonna stop my screen so we can look at each other's faces.
Hi, Emily. So I love this. I didn't realize I was using your framework, but I was having this conversation with our instructional designers, trying to kind of introduce them to learning analytics and letting them know the limitations of what you get out of new analytics or what you get out of, we use MediaSite. So MediaSite has some analytics that you can look at, and how they can have these discussions with their faculty developers as to, here's what you can get from this data, but you need to really pair it with some more qualitative type data, exactly what you're talking about. I think you call that's that amend piece. But I'm wondering, how do you get people over that hump of, oh geez, I have to qualitative, I feel like they're like, this is easy, just give me data. Can't you just give me data? And the grabbing the qualitative piece and then looking at it together is a lot more effort. What are some tips to help frame that conversation so faculty developers don't look at the IDs as if they're asking them to do just yet another projecty thing on top of teaching and researching and writing, that they're already stacked. But you know exactly what I'm talking about. I want to help give the IDs some tools to have that conversation with their faculty developers.
Sure. Yeah, I frame these things differently depending on who I'm talking to, as you might imagine. Different conversations land differently with different folks. When I'm talking with somebody who's saying essentially, just give me all the data, I just want to do the calculations and be done with it, I typically go the route of explaining that what you're using is incomplete data to come to a conclusion, right? Like I think that is the most powerful argument, especially when you're talking with like IT folks. Hey y'all, you just wrote an equation and you're missing out on an enormous body of the variables that lead to a conclusion. That's not great. You're program wouldn't work very well if you wrote it that way. This isn't going to work very well if we do it here either. So maybe let's try to get all of the information that we need to make an accurate, interpretation of whatever we're looking at.
So just really knowing who you're talking to, which is always part of our training for instructional designers, is how do you learn who this person is across the table from you, and then hitting them where it matters to them.
Yeah, I think so. There are a couple of things that tend to ring true across audiences, and that is one of them. Like, I might change the way that I talk about, hey, this is an incomplete data set, so we're getting incomplete conclusions. Like, that is the kind of language I might use with the IT folks, and less so with whatever folks who are outside of that field. But generally, the idea will land if you can find the language that's going to resonate.
Yeah. Thanks. This is great.
I'm glad it's helpful. That's all you can hope for, right? When somebody comes back and says that this is helpful. And that's what I've been getting here from our faculty, which I'll reiterate. I've been talking with the faculty about learning analytics for a bit. And it is always shocking and fantastic when they indicate, yeah, actually, this was helpful. It's not easy to achieve with this abstract of a topic. Any other questions or comments?
We're getting loads of well-deserved kudos in the chat, Emily. So good job. I wanted to add, I had gotten a note from someone asking about the Canvas course, and people can set up a guest account. And we have, I think that's one of the ones where you can set up it using your social media stuff if you'd like, or you can set up a regular guest account at IU. So you can do social login or others.
Yeah, anything that I make available for as part of my Unizin job, I try to make it public so that you all can get access to it. So if you have any issues getting into like Pressbook, Canvas site, whatever, again, EMIHUNT, I think it's in the chat at IU, and I can help you get access, because my intent is to share it with you all. All right. I think I'm gonna call it, if only so I can scoot to my next session, get rolling with the Unizin data platform. Yep.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm gonna go ahead and end this now if nobody has any objections, because I need to host my next session. So
Awesome. Thanks, everyone.